Welcome to Perspectives on Prevention, the podcast series from the Prevention and Early Intervention Network, where we talk with people about intervening early and preventing difficulties arising for children, families, and communities. Today, I'm joined by Teresa Heeney, who is the CEO with Early Childhood Ireland, which is a very well-established national organisation supporting services that work with children in early years. So tell us a little bit about the work of ECI before we go any further, Teresa.
So Early Childhood Ireland is an advocacy and membership organisation in the early years and the school-age care sector in Ireland. We have about 4,000 members who run preschools and creches and school-age services across the country. All types of services are members, the small community service, the small preschool service, as well as the large chains. So typically, all types of services would be a member of Early Childhood Ireland. Our vision and mission is about, we have two key areas of work. One is about impacting the system and improving the system. And the second is about impacting settings and helping settings to improve the quality of their services for children. We also have a particular interest in safeguarding and early years services. So that's what we do, and that's what our work is about. And then our work breaks down into 5 teams. We have a PAC team, which is our advocacy team. We have a research team. We have a quality team. We have a communications team and an operations team. So a lot of our staff would be involved in researching, preparing for, and in developing CPD content for our members, and sometimes as well that is available for everybody in the sector. And then our policy team would spend its time working with stakeholders in order to get enhancements on policy and in order to improve services and the system in general.
Okay, great. You haven't always worked in the early years sector though, have you?
Myself personally, I didn't know. So I began my professional career in youth work, and then I moved into a role as the research and training manager with the ISPCC. And following that, I worked with Cherish, which is now known as One Family and headed up by Karen Kiernan. And then I moved into the National Children's Nurseries Association, running their training programme. That was in the early 2000s, at a time when the government was beginning to bring a particular focus on early years and invest in early years. And so I moved from that job into working with the NCNA and to develop a training programme for their members. And then, so at that time, there were other colleagues, and particularly the Irish Preschool Play Association, or the IPPA, which people I'm sure will remember. And around the time of the introduction of the free preschool programme, myself and the then CEO of the IPPA, Marian Quinn, we began to have a conversation about how we might advocate better and stronger for children in services. And we talked a lot, and then we talked to our board, and we made a proposal that maybe we should look at creating a new organisation and collapsing our resources into a stronger entity. So our board accepted that recommendation, and around 2012, I think, we announced an intention to collapse both organisations into one new organisation, and that was Early Childhood Ireland. Irene was the first CEO for that organisation, and then after Irene's retirement, I took over the leadership of the organisation. So that was obviously a very interesting experience to merge two organisations, and all of the, finding new premises, all of the HR issues, all of the branding issues, and so on and so forth. But it was very exciting and professionally rewarding time, I would say.
What was the sort of context for that decision? Because I'm sure any of us could look at the landscape of social services and think about, surely those organisations could merge? What's the difference between them? So what made that different?
So, well, what made that different? So the context was, as I said, there was a very much an interest from government and policymakers in early years. And Irene and I would have acknowledged that we were finding ourselves almost having to compete with each other for voice, for work, for audience, for our training, and so on. And that really didn't make any sense. And so that was the context. It was really as simple as that. And we were able to find a way through any of the, sticky issues that maybe might have tripped us up. We were able to have an open conversation about those, and we made promises to the staff, for example, that there would be roles for everybody in the new organisation, and then there are some legacy terms and conditions that you bring with you, and you do all of that. But I think ultimately it was a really good decision. The board were very strong in their backing. We got support from government as well at the time, who could see that it made good sense to have a strong organisation, a strong voice.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, it's not something we hear very much about. We don't hear about mergers very often. So yeah, well done. Let's go back to basics, Teresa, and maybe just tell us a bit about why the early years is such an important period of a child's life.
I think that anybody listening to the podcast will agree that the early years are fundamental. They set children up for the rest of their lives. So the experiences they have in their earliest years, we know the phrase that every childhood lasts a lifetime. So the experiences that they have in their earliest years, need to be as good as they can possibly be. They set them up for their social development, their physical development, emotional development, intellectual development. And most of that is achieved by very important things, of course, like care and nutrition and physical development, but also then the people that they form an attachment to. So having good, reliable, strong, supportive relationships that children get all of their strength from and their learning from. So, we talk about the investment in the door, the explore years, and not the Facebook years or whatever it might be now. But yeah, I think we do know, and the research confirms very much about the importance of good, strong supports for children and their families in their earliest years. And that's why supports like, yourselves, your work here in CDI are so important, supporting children and families and seeing children in the context of their families. And then early year services, if families are using an early year service, whether that's a home-based service, and a childminding service, or an early year service, they should be the very best that they can be, because they are replacing a parent or a key caregiver in a child's life. And so they really, really need to be as good as they can be for all of those reasons.
What does a good quality early years service look like? How do I, if I'm a parent, how do I know it's a good service?
Well, a lot of people say that you get a gut feeling, but that's really not enough. A good service should be, I am an aunt of a lot of people who have small children, and they think that Teresa will tell them where the gold star service is, and it's not like that. It's but so look at the evidence and see what that tells you first. Look at what the inspection reports are like. I mean, there are several types of inspection reports in early years in Ireland. There's the TUSLA inspection reports, and TUSLA is the regulator. Then there's the Department of Education inspection reports. The HSE does health and safety inspections. So that information is probably available to any parent. And there are minimum standards in the regulations, but a parent going into a service would want to be seeing good ratios. You'd want to be, I'm always interested in the qualifications of the staff. I'm always interested in the turnover rates of the staff in a service. I'm always interested in having conversations with the staff in a service and the manager, there being time for you to be able to have those conversations. So, all of those things together should inform your gut instinct. And then, of course, you go into a service and you do get a gut instinct. But what I would always advise about is that you might get a good instinct about Mary, who's the person in charge of the room that your baby's going to be in. But in a few short months, your baby will be moving into a different room, and who's the leader in that room, who's the key teacher in that room, or if that person is liable to move on or get a new job in a different service. So it has to be about more than that. For me, at the top of the most important issue in every service is the quality of the leader, the quality of the leadership in the setting, and how well they run the setting and how consistently the setting is run. The quality of the leadership in the setting will kind of always tell you about what's happening in that setting.
People say that about schools as well, don't they?
And they're right.
Principal really sets the tone.
Yeah. People will say, is it easy? Do you have to have an appointment to go in? Do you have to have an appointment to go into the school? Do you have to have an appointment to go into the early years service? Can you arrive? Can you rock up at 3:00 and have a look at it that day? Is there an open door policy for you to be able to do that? Now, you'd hear a lot of people saying that has changed a lot in schools and early year services since COVID. But I think that a good service knows that a parent wants to see a service in the cut and thrust of a day, not at 6:00 in the evening when there's only 3 babies left, or, and so on. So it's, I think a good service knows that parents feel vulnerable and really want to get a good sense of the service for their child.
So let's talk about the advocacy element of ECI's work. And you mentioned that there was a period going back 15 or more years ago where there was the discussion about the first free year and there was beginning to be government attention on early years services. So my sense is that early years is now on politicians' agendas. It's something that is discussed in coming up to elections, which would never have happened 20 years ago. So how has that happened? I mean, it seems like that's quite a transformation.
So the introduction of the free preschool year back in 2010, just at the time of the collapse of the budget, our economy at the time, that was a fundamentally important development. So the introduction of the free preschool year was really, really important. So what has happened since then? One of the key things that has happened since then is that it has become a rite of passage. While it's not yet on a legislative basis, I mean, it's something that I hope will happen, and there's a commitment to doing that. But what it meant was that very quickly, over 90% of children enjoyed their free preschool year and then their second year. And so government now had a line of sight on most children from the age of 3 in Ireland who were attending these in the main publicly funded services. So then that means that government then has an opportunity to attach on a number of other quality initiatives. And so we've seen that and the development of additional policies. So we had the launch then of the First Five policy, which is, I think acknowledged as a very good, very well-rounded policy that was developed with a lot of consultation. And that policy then has given rise to a number of other strategies that fall out of it, including the nurturing skills, workforce strategy, and then the partnership for the public good funding strategy. So you've got all of that and the international evidence that would confirm that investment in the early years is really important. So, nobody was doing it because it was, good for your health only. It was because we knew it was that this very important time in a child's life, and government was making a commitment to those young children by introducing this free preschool programme, and everything that has evolved since that, I would say, as well. And then as the economy maybe grew and developed, there was a call for increased capacity and for the introduction of financial supports, because the costs were very significant for parents. So, and so the Partnership for the Public Good policy was developed then. Again, another policy that was developed during COVID. So now we have that policy in place and the introduction of core funding, which is designed to support services, run a quality service. It also limits the costs that can be passed on to parents. There's a fee freeze, which is part of that. And all of that now has resulted in a couple of additional issues. So the sector has grown as a result of all of that. There is a greater demand for parents because it is more affordable than maybe it used to be. So you've got an increase in demand, an increase in capacity, but the key part of all of that triangle that we are struggling with is the issue of the workforce and being able to recruit and retain the workforce. So Early Childhood Ireland has had for the last budget and continues to have a key ask, which is about pay parity, because we have a lot of our workforce is employed or is trained and educated to the same level as primary schools, but they don't enjoy anything like the same terms and conditions of employment. We have a lot of people, so that they would be people employed at level 8. We have people in roles at level 7, at level 6 and level 5 who don't enjoy anything like the same terms and conditions of employment. So what that is resulting in then is a difficulty in even recruiting people from training to work in early years. And say in the budget last week, we saw an announcement of an additional 1,700 SNAs. And I looked at the most recent Department of Education data on the current SNA workforce, and 38% of the current SNA workforce have early years qualifications. So, it's great to see the announcement in the budget of the additional 1,700 SNAs, but we certainly took a deep breath in Early Childhood Ireland about what that's going to mean and how many people might choose to exit the early years or school age services and go to those roles in schools, because they do enjoy better terms and conditions of employment. And the international evidence would confirm research would confirm very clearly that the most important indicator of quality is the qualifications of the workforce, is the quality of the workforce. That's not going to come as a big surprise to anybody. So if we don't prioritise the workforce and ensure that we have low turnover rates and that we have highly qualified people, then we can't be sure of the quality of the experience the children are getting, and that ultimately has to be what concerns us. We have at the moment a 25% turnover of staff nationally in services, and in some parts of the country, in Dublin for example, in some parts of Dublin, there's a turnover rate of 52%. And they're very, very worrying numbers, and they're not good enough. They're simply not good enough, particularly when we know how important the qualifications of the staff is for the children's experiences.
So what's happening to address that in terms of both the qualifications but also the pay parity?
So what's happening is the union, SIPTU, the union, and CSI, which is the trade association based in IBEC, Childcare Services Ireland, CSI, they have been negotiating EROs, employment regulation orders. So there have been a number of EROs signed now, most recently, and the new rates of pay were introduced on the 13th of October this year. And government funds those increases, but from our point of view, it's a very, very slow process. It takes too long to get a small increase, and that's why we're saying that if government chose a date where pay parity would be introduced, it may not change anything today, but it would send a very strong signal to the workforce that this is a sector that you can choose to work in, and that you can expect to enjoy the same terms and conditions that you might wish to have because you want to get a mortgage or you want to get a car or whatever it is that you might want to do. So it's about a signal as much as the parity itself. It's also an important signal, because currently with the ERO process, and I commend the parties that are involved, because I'm sure that the negotiations are not easy. It's not something that I have to do. So I absolutely commend the people who are sitting around that table doing those negotiations. But there are two negotiations that have to happen. There is the ERO negotiation, but then there's also the budget negotiation to fund the ERO process. So I think that that's too much for the early years sector, and I think it'll take too long as well before we can begin to address the long-term issues at play.
And presumably those staffing challenges, workforce development kind of delays, is that kind of fundamental to the lack of places in parts of the country?
Well, we would hear Early Childhood Ireland members talking about the desire to expand, for example, but that they just are too worried about the possibility of not being able to recruit. We'd hear that. We would hear about, like I spoke at a graduation ceremony the year before last. It was in December. The ceremony was in December for a group that had finished their course in June. And by December, there was 1 out of the 50 still working in early years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a critical issue. It is absolutely a critical issue. And the nurturing skills is the workforce policy document, and it has a lot of really important commitments, including other issues like a CPD infrastructure, which of course is necessary as well for the workforce. So it's not just about paying conditions, but we have it's probably a 98% female workforce, and a lot of those women work in settings where they don't get any mat leave top-up or no pension benefits, and it's not good enough for that workforce. It just isn't. And you can choose to get your level 8 and get a job in a primary school tomorrow, and it's just pulls apart. Yeah. And in terms of turnover of staff, if most parents, if they rocked up into a school and they were told that 4 out of every 10 of the staff here in the school is going to change this year, or in some parts of the country 1 out of 2, there'd be questions in the door. I firmly believe there would be questions in the door about that. Yeah.
Wow. So what does all of that say about how much we value the early years sector?
So, I think that a lot of people don't hold the same view about what or who the early years is for, or who early years settings are for. If early years settings were for children, if they were designed with the needs of children in mind, then I think things would be different. But at the moment, I think that early years settings are understood by a lot of people as being for parents and to afford parents an opportunity to go to work. Now, interestingly, when children go to primary school, that also affords parents an opportunity to go to work. It's not very different. But we don't think of schools as being for parents. We do think of them as being for children. So there is something about a shift in our perspective about the importance of early years, our perspective and our understanding about the importance of early years, why it's good for children, and why it's good for children and how it helps children for their life today when they're children, but also their life in the future. And I do think that lens, we need to work on changing that lens and seeing the investment as essential for children's experiences, not for parents who are going to work.
And that kind of distinction between early years and primary school raises the question, should early years participation be mandatory? Because school is. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that'll be a challenge in Ireland because of the constitutional, rights of parents, and that the child's primary educator is their parent. So I'm not sure that would ever be terribly easy. And I think that we're thereabouts anyway in terms of participation rates, and we have a lot of new programs to help improve the participation rates. Equal Start is a new model for early years, the early years DASH model. And that's designed to support the inclusion of children who don't participate, from communities that don't participate as fully. And that's really important. And the AIM model, which is to support children with disability in services, is also a really good model. So I think that the policies that have been introduced are designed to support a full inclusion of all children. As to whether So I do believe that it's important that early years is made available on a legislative basis for children. And what would happen after that was introduced remains to be seen. And what the role of the new single agency, when it's introduced, what its role will be in terms of ensuring that all children who want to attend can attend their early years. Their first 2 years, or their 2 years of preschool at least.
So you've touched there on the sort of inclusion policies and practices. So let's talk for a minute about the challenges for early years settings outside of the workforce issues and the difficulty with recruitment, retention, etc. But certainly one of the things that I think, any of us working with children and families, we're all very aware of is the really quite significant growth in the number of children that either have a diagnosis or are suspected of having an additional need. So that and other challenges for what's that like in a typical early years setting?
I think that the big challenge is having, for a lot of early year settings, when a child comes to the setting, say when the child is 2 years and 8 months, if it's attending for preschool, that setting might be the first time that a parent has ever had a call or a discussion with a professional that maybe their child needs a bit of support. So that's a really important conversation. And my experience is that the people working as inclusion coordinators, maybe who've done the LINK program, they're well trained and they're well prepared, and they've done it before. But they know that they need to take the utmost care because it's very difficult for parents. So finding the time and having the time to give to parents who are busy, probably, finding the time when they come in at 5 in the evening, wanting to reassure them, wanting to help them understand that there's lots of things that can be done, there's lots of strategies. So I would say time themselves and confidence to be able to offer reassurance for parents, because it's very often I would hear members of Early Childhood Ireland reporting that they are the first people to tell parents that there's something that can be done. But there is a wide infrastructure now as well, because there's like 100 plus, I don't know how many exactly, but 100 plus mentors working in Better Start who can provide those supports as well, both the setting and by extension to the parent. So I'd say they're the essential issues at hand when those children arrive into a setting and they need a little bit of extra support with something or other. And the AIM model has been designed with that in mind. And it was a really welcome development when the AIM model was introduced, for sure, because we had been hearing from our members before that they had children coming in, but weren't they really able to offer them anything? And then the AIM model was introduced. And I think in general, people would say that while maybe it's not perfect, it has certainly helped an awful lot.
So AIM being the access and
inclusion model.
Yeah.
And it has a number of different parts. There's additional financial supports to employ more staff, for sure, but there's also access to capital supports, and there's access to mentoring and access to policies and procedures and CPD and so on. So it is a complex model to address the complexity of the issue, I suppose, of inclusion in the early years. And then more recently, then Equal Start has been introduced because the evidence was clear that particularly children from Traveller and Roma families were participating. There were fewer of them participating than the national population. And so Equal Start has been designed to support that. And we would certainly hear from members that the Equal Start model gives them that additional time to maybe meet with families from new communities and reassure them, or being able to have the time to explain to them what's going on in the setting so that they can feel reassured and be confident that they can bring their child to the setting.
So it's quite remarkable, the amount of change that's happened, isn't it? I mean, I albeit there are big challenges, but actually it is an area that has had a lot of policy change, a lot of investment, a lot of kind of consideration of evidence. So, I mean, what's enabled that, do you think?
Good policy, I would say, developed by good policymakers, taking a rigorous approach to the design of that policy, looking at what the evidence is. There's no doubt the level of change is huge in 20 years, maybe 20 years. Huge growth. Increase in the size of the sector, increase in the size of the workforce, the development of, say the Astor framework, which has already been now redesigned and relaunched this year. The Astor framework, which is the curriculum framework in early years, would be recognised internationally as like being of the highest standard. So, you're absolutely right. There's a lot to be remarked upon and to be welcoming of. There's no doubt about that, for sure. Yeah.
What are you proudest of in terms of ECI's role in influencing and shaping some of that transformation?
I would say that what I'm most proud of is that we keep our eye on what is going to make the experience, what, Mary's experience or Martin's experience good in their early years setting. I mean, we believe that's to be our work. Yes, what is the child's experience like in the setting? That's our work, and that's an absolutely critical North Star for us, which is why and that guides our work, it guides our policy work. How can the system be better to make sure that children have good experiences? How can the setting be supported to make sure that the children have good quality experiences? That's absolutely, and being clear about that is what I'm most proud of, I would think, in Early Childhood Ireland.
Great. Teresa, the National Women's Council has a campaign for a publicly funded early years sector. Is that something that ECI supports? Is that something that you think is something we should all be looking for?
Well, for sure. I mean, Ireland is way too low in the OECD table of investment. We have to at least double, if not triple, current levels of investment. And even though we're at 1.4 billion now, we definitely need to get that over 3 billion. So, there's a job of work to do in terms of each of the next 5 budgets for this government. And we heard the Minister say that last budget was the first of 5 budgets. So, we'll have huge expectations for next budget, for sure. So there's a job of work to go in terms of levels of investment. And at the moment, the Irish government is already contributing a huge amount of money into our sector. Like 1.4 billion isn't nothing. Like so, while we're not fully publicly funded, we're certainly a lot better than we were. There's no doubt about that. And we certainly would support targeted investment and making sure that children who need it most get what they need and that they get good quality services. So, the Minister announced the introduction next year, or the building next year, of 700 public places. We don't know how that's going to be arrived at. We don't know, does that mean that the state will run them? How the places will be identified. Now the department has loads of information in order to be able to decide where is the best places for them. There are lots of childcare deserts around the country where there's no provision at all. So we need to be targeting the areas where there are children who really need a good quality early year service and making sure that there is provision so that they can attend good quality service. So we have a very mixed model, I suppose. That's all a very roundabout way of saying we have a very mixed model. We have small private services on every street in the country. Most of them run by women who established that somewhere in the last 20 years. We have a lot of those services, and then we have community services. We have a lot of services now in schools. We have large chains as well, and so it's a very mixed model. But we don't have as publicly delivered services in the same way as we deliver schools. So that remains to be seen if that's what the Minister intends doing with these 700 places. Minister Foley, if that's what she intends doing with the 700 places that she said will be coming on stream next year. She also announced that there will be a consultation beginning shortly to develop a national action plan for childcare, I think is the name of the consultation. But that'll be another opportunity for people to share their views about what they think about, public funding, a public model, what'll work over the next 5 years.
Good. Well, that's something our listeners will no doubt be watching for and eager to contribute to. Teresa, what are your kind of priority actions then for the next, for the foreseeable for ECI?
So our work will continue to be about providing supports to enhance quality, and it will be about continuing to advocate for enhancements to the system, and specifically in relation to investment, so that we can build a fit-for-purpose system where parents can predict the quality of where children have access to services, where there is consistent quality across services, where a parent can be assured that the quality in the service is going to be of a high standard, so that we can all know that the investment is delivering good experiences for children. So I think that'll be our work for the next few years.
Well, good luck with it, and thank you for joining us on Perspectives on Prevention. Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks, Mo.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives on Prevention. We hope we've inspired you and given you something to think about. If you want to suggest someone for us to chat with, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us an email at info@pein.ie.